We'd also like to acknowledge and thank What's Up Prince William for covering and filming our event today. Stephanie's in the back of the room there, so just be aware that the camera's there if you don't want to be on camera. You might want to move somewhere else in the room, but we do appreciate What's Up Prince William and their participation in this event today. So thank you, Stephanie, for being here. Now let's bring up our special guests, and when I call your name, if you would come up here and join at the table. We have first Mike Discenza. He is U.S. Treasurer of Transurban. We have Chris Doherty. He is the Director of Corporate Affairs for I-66 Mobility Partners. And we have our own Marty Nohe right up here, the Chairman of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. You each have 10 minutes to speak. So Jane is in the room, and she's our clock keeper over here, and she will keep me informed. You can do it from, if you'd like to sit in your seat there, or if you'd like to use the podium here. Jane has also got your PowerPoints all ready to go. So at this point, I think we start out with Mike. Mike gets first swing.
I'll stand. Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Mike Discenza, North American Treasurer for Transurban. For those of you who don't know about Transurban, I'll tell you a little bit about us and the projects that we've developed in the infrastructure space over the last 10 years or so. We'll talk a little bit about the economic benefits and how we've partnered with the Commonwealth of Virginia to bring this solution to alleviate that picture. The traffic is maddening, I'm sure, to all of you, and we're here to try to solve that problem. So Transurban we're actually an Australian company that's been around for about 20 years, been in the US for about 10 years. It's listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. We're pretty sizable, one of the 10 or so largest companies in Australia. There are about 15 roads that Transurban has developed in Australia, and then in the US, there are two that you're probably most familiar with, which are 495, the Capital Beltway, and 95. We'll talk a little bit more about what the various aspects of those projects entail. My job as treasurer, I have many jobs, but one of them is to help finance these projects. And so we, as I'll describe, bring our own private capital to these projects, and then we go raise the debt, which is the critical part of our projects, and that can be private activity bonds or TIFIA, which is the U.S. Department of Transportation financing program that exists to facilitate the development of infrastructure in the U.S. We have, through these two assets, made about a $3 billion investment in the Commonwealth. This is a long-term bet. These are long-term concession agreements that Transurban has entered into with the state of Virginia, 70 years. So we are here to stay, and we're putting our own money up to back that commitment. And as I said, the U.S. business is about 200 employees now. We have two different locations. We have a headquarters in Tyson's Corner, right off of the Beltway. And then we have our operations center in Alexandria, which looks a lot like an air traffic control center. It's pretty awesome. I mean, you talk about resolution on this screen. We have, I don't know, we must have 35 screens, and we're constantly monitoring the roadway, and I'll get into why that's so important. So here's a map. This shouldn't be a surprise to anybody in this room. The history is that we started on the 495 Express Lanes project, which opened in 2012. About 14 miles of new roadway, which built for the first time the concept of high occupancy tolling lanes, which allows you to pay a toll that is a variable toll that changes based on traffic, and that was opened in 2012. Then we moved on to the 95 Express Lanes project, which basically connects the Springfield to almost Garrisonville Road south. That's a 29-mile, 2 to 3 reversible lane project, and it converted what were HOV lanes into HOT lanes. And then 395, this is near and dear to my heart because I've only been with the company about a year, and this project, I worked for the better part of last year on getting this across the line to financial close, which just happened in July. We had a groundbreaking with the governor and lots of local reps. And so that is a project to convert, to basically take those 8 miles of HOV lanes, which are currently there, to 3 reversible high occupancy toll lanes. The construction is starting right now. We're building those roads at night over the next 2 years, and we hope to be done about 2 years from right now, which is very exciting for all of us. How do they work? This is kind of interesting to me. I didn't really appreciate how much technology was embedded in this business. As you probably have noticed, if you've driven on these roads, there are sensors about every 1/10 of a mile, and they're constantly speaking to the transponder in your car. And that's how we can manage and monitor the flow of traffic and set the tolls accordingly. And so what we're trying to do is deliver we're trying to give you an experience which takes the variability out of sitting in annoying traffic. So we have a service agreement with the Commonwealth that we're delivering constant flow at a reasonable speed. And how do we do that? We raise and lower tolls to drive traffic on or off our lane or onto the free lanes so that we can guarantee the free flow of traffic on our lanes. This is an interesting picture because it gives you a sense of the variability. There's 2 different ways to look at this, and we've all experienced this. The orange line on the left-hand chart is sort of the average travel time in the regular lanes, depending on the time of day, and there's a lot of variability in there, and you can have a 50-minute backup, which all of us have experienced. The blue line is the average travel time in the express lanes. So we're basically committing to provide that level of certainty in your travel time. It doesn't, we're not expecting people to use it all the time every day, but for those times when you need to be to an appointment or a work meeting or a doctor's appointment, that's what we're in the business to do. The picture on the right-hand side is sort of, I think, even more extreme because it gives you a sense of the worst measured times in terms of backup, and that red line, you don't ever want to be on that red line. Sometimes we all have sat there, and that blue line, again, is the kind of steady express lane experience that we're trying to deliver. This is a little bit about the economic impact of these projects. These are big, transformational projects. Multi-billion dollars of economic activity generated by these projects, not just in the construction at the outset, but in the operations and maintenance over the life. So these are tens of thousands of jobs, a very meaningful commitment to small business and women and minority businesses in the region. And we've talked a little bit about the time savings. You see up there on the right-hand side, these are meaningful, 15 to 40 minute travel time savings, which we think is a pretty impressive result given the alternative. I think that I'll close with this picture that I think is an interesting one because it gives a sense for the ability for a limited state contribution to these transportation projects to mobilize substantial private capital from companies like Transurban, and you'll hear from one of our competitors next about this. And these are, in the alternative, the state would have to come up with funding sources for all the construction, all the O&M, and all the major maintenance. And what we've done is cut that and taken all of that risk on our backs. And so it's a pretty major transfer of risk from the public to the private sector, and we think it makes sense in this instance, and we can still make a reasonable return. I guess we get these questions a lot. What are the average tolls? What are the max tolls? You see these sometimes referenced. You might see them on signs. The average tolls are in the $5 to $7 range. Yes, there are maximum tolls that are experienced at times that are, you know, at peak, but I think the most important thing is that the bottom row there, which is most tolls are under 10 or 12 bucks, and that's, I think, a reasonable place to be. I think I'm running out of time, so this is really the last chart, and it gets to the value proposition that we're providing to the public and how people perceive what we're offering and whether they are supporting it. And we think the proof is in not just in these surveys that we do from time to time, but also just in the traffic growth that we're observing over the last several years since we've opened these projects. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but I think the overall takeaway here is there's pretty broad support in the public for the concept of public-private partnerships and delivering these types of transportation innovations. Let me close with that. And okay, answer any questions. I guess we'll do that after. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Doherty. I'm with I-66 Express Mobility Partners. A little bit about who we are. We are the new concessionaire for the Commonwealth, and we'll be doing the I-66 outside the Beltway project from 495 out here to Gainesville. Before I get too far into it, I did want to introduce a colleague that many of you probably know, either as Nancy Heitschuh or Nancy Smith, but Nancy is with FAM Construction, and I'll explain who FAM Construction is in just a moment. A little bit about our company. We're a joint venture between two worldwide leaders in doing public-private partnerships. One is Cintra, which is a Spanish firm. They manage about 1,200 miles of managed lanes on projects around the world. And the other is Meridian Infrastructure, which is a French firm. And some of the projects that we've done here in North America include the LBJ and the North Tarrant Expressway in Dallas. We are currently working on I-77 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Just completed the ring road around Toronto, and other projects like the Presidio Parkway in San Francisco and Port of Miami Tunnel, and don't blame me, but LaGuardia Airport, which is currently a massive renovation project. So similar to what Mike was talking about, we just achieved our financial close last week. It's a $3.5 billion project, and we'll be actually breaking ground with Governor McAuliffe out on Route 28 on Monday. So it's been a long time coming. We've spent a lot of time with communities here in Prince William and Fairfax County with concerns about the highway, especially where we're in places near the battlefield or in some of the more densely populated areas on the eastern side of the project. So I was going to dive a little more into the weeds so you know what's coming with I-66, since Mike did such a good job of talking about P3s generally. First off, this week we are doing public hearings throughout the corridor. So we've just finished 2 in Fairfax County, and tomorrow night we'll be in Bristow at Piney Branch Elementary School, 6 p.m. I know all of you are going to come. But that's the last opportunity for community members to come out and make public comments on the project. And between Nancy, myself, and several colleagues, we have spent the last 6 months meeting in people's carports, garages, libraries, elementary schools, backyards, and everywhere in between. So we have divided the project for internal purposes into 3 segments. And for those of you who are really interested in seeing the plans in more detail, you can find it all on transform66.org, which is VDOT's website. As I mentioned, it's a $3.5 billion project. The goals of the project are fairly straightforward. I don't think you can throw a dead cat along 66 without hitting somebody that's stopped and frustrated in traffic. So we're going to relieve that congestion. We're going to move 2,000 to 4,000 more people per hour. We will also be funding new bus and transit routes along the corridor. And a video I'm going to show in a moment, we'll be adding 4,000 park and ride spaces. So one thing from sort of a cultural standpoint is 95 has a much more advanced carpooling and slugging culture than we have on 66. So this is truly a multimodal project. And then we'll be improving safety throughout the corridor, bringing the the current 66 up to code. So a great example would be around Nutley Street in 66. It's one of the most dangerous cloverleaf intersections in the interstate highway system. So it would be very innovative in that regard. As I mentioned, it's multimodal, so we're also incorporating bike and pedestrian paths at several portions along the project. There'll be 2 express lanes in each direction, 3 general purpose lanes in each direction. HOV and transit will travel obviously in the HOV lanes at no cost. We are also reserving space in the median for future transit needs. So in Fairfax, that means Metro, when it eventually may expand. In Prince William, it's just reserving that space because this is probably the last opportunity to redo 66. And as I mentioned, there'll be bike and pedestrian trails. So I'm going to, do I click one more time? And when I think of movie directors, I think of John Huston.
In 2022, I-66 outside the Beltway will be transformed into a multimodal corridor focused on moving more people, providing safer, more reliable trips, and offering new travel choices. When complete, the corridor will feature 2 express lanes and 3 general purpose lanes in each direction, with ramp-to-ramp connections provided between interchanges where needed. Combined with new bicycle and pedestrian facilities, new or improved interchange configurations, new transit options, and reserved median space for future transit, tomorrow's I-66 will move more people and serve the needs of Northern Virginia's travelers well into the future. One important element of transforming I-66 is new choices for ride-sharing and transit. New park and ride lots will be built near I-66 at the intersection of US 29 and University Boulevard and off Balls Ford Road and Notes Drive. Both park and ride lots will have a combined capacity of more than 3,000 parking spaces, including space for commuter buses, kiss and ride areas, carpooling, van pooling, and local shuttles, as well as pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. These lots will have direct access to the express lanes. New access ramps just east of Sudley Road will allow drivers to enter the express lanes from the general purpose lanes when traveling eastbound at I-66, and to exit the express lanes in the westbound direction, just prior to the I-66 Sudley Road interchange. As you enter Fairfax County, new pedestrian and bike facilities have been added along the corridor. Working closely with VDOT, local governments, parks, communities, and cycling advocates, 18 miles of new shared use trail will be built by Express Mobility Partners and others, integrating with existing and planned trails near I-66. At Route 28, interchange improvements will allow for the removal of the 4 traffic signals along Route 28 between I-66 and E.C. Lawrence Park by mid-2020, providing relief to the Route 28 corridor. New ramps will provide direct access between Route 28 and I-66 express and general purpose lanes. Braddock and Walney roads will be reconnected with an overpass, and ramps from the new Braddock Road overpass will give direct connection to I-66. Between Route 28 and Stringfellow Road, in both the east and westbound directions, new ramps provide access from the express lanes to the general purpose lanes. New connection to Stringfellow Road will give drivers direct access to the I-66 express lanes to and from the east. New ramps at Monument Drive give access to and from the express lanes east and westbound. Noise walls help to reduce the impact of highway traffic noise on surrounding communities. Noise walls locations, shown in this video, are based upon the preliminary noise analysis. Final noise study results will be available in spring 2018. At At Route 50, ramps from eastbound Route 50 to the eastbound express lanes and from the westbound express lanes to westbound Route 50 are added. The redesigned interchange also features a new shared use path, creating connections to surrounding communities. The Chain Bridge Road interchange will be rebuilt to include 4 new express lane access ramps, to and from the east and west, and improved connections from the general purpose lanes. The Vaden Drive overpass will be rebuilt to include new ramps connecting the I-66 express lanes to and from the west with the Vienna Metro Station parking facilities. Only passenger vehicles, buses, and light trucks will have access at Vaden. The Nutley Street interchange will be reconfigured into a diverging diamond, improving movement and safety within and through the interchange. A new ramp east of Nutley Street near Prosperity Avenue provides express lane access from the eastbound I-66 general purpose lanes. This ramp will also allow drivers in the eastbound general purpose lanes to access the I-495 express lanes. The Gallows Road overpass will be rebuilt, shifting Gallows Road towards the east, creating a larger buffer between the roadway and Stenwood Elementary School, and reducing construction impact on the Dunmorry Metro Station. To accommodate the widening of I-66, WMATA's traction power substation will be relocated 1,000 feet to the west on existing WMATA property along Prosperity Avenue. The I-495 I-66 interchange will be reconfigured with 6 new ramps, providing direct connections between the general purpose and express lanes of I-66 and I-495.
We love that.
The existing ramps from the I-495 northbound general purpose and express lanes to I-66 westbound will be reconfigured to provide for direct access to the I-66 westbound express lanes. A new ramp will be built to replace existing connections so that I-495 northbound travelers can still easily access the I-66 westbound general purpose lanes. Access ramps from the I-495 southbound general purpose and express lanes to I-66 westbound are reconfigured to provide travelers with the option of accessing either the I-66 general purpose or express lanes. The I-66 outside the Beltway project is an investment in multimodal travel that will help transform Northern Virginia. The combination of express and general purpose lanes, new transit choices, and bike and pedestrian facilities will move more people, improve safety, and reduce congestion throughout the I-66 corridor.
So I noticed a few people got a little choked up when we talked about the 4 lights going away on 28 in a moment. So, picture tells 1,000 words, so that's a really good overview that we just introduced this week of the project. And a lot of you rely on 66, not just here in Prince William, but also throughout the corridor. So very quickly where we are in the process, it's been several years in the making. So in respect out of time, we're finishing our design hearings this week. It is what's called a design build project. So we continue to work on refinements to the plan, and we've incorporated a lot of community feedback, especially on the bike and pedestrian trail, as well as some of the ramp configurations. We'll be breaking ground next week, and we will start some early construction activity by the end of the year, and you'll really see us ramping up on construction in the spring. And one thing that we'll be working with our partners here at the Chamber on is how can we get the word to your employees so they know the impact to them and their daily commutes as we get through this very complex project. So we'll start the right-of-way process as soon as we're done the hearings this week. As we mentioned in the video, we're delivering several of the park and rides early in the project, which was a requirement. and we're taking care of Route 28 2 years before we will open for tolling. Just very quickly, we will be letting everybody know via every possible communications channel what the impacts to construction are going to be. So you know when ramp and lane closures will occur, we'll be delivering that through a mobile app, through the web, Twittergram, and every other social media site that you can think of. And we've really committed to the public that we are going to them first, especially in directly impacted communities, so they know exactly what to expect throughout the process. And for those of you who got a little choked up with the Route 28 part, we would welcome you to make comments before the end of the month to VDOT in support of the project, especially as we get further out west here. People are really eager to see some improvement, and VDOT has called this Transform 66, and it truly is transformational. So we're looking forward at the end of 5 years to giving people back more time in the evening to get to their Little League game or their Girl Scout meeting, or maybe take a little more time in the morning to get done what they need to get done, given the 8 to 10 hours a day that currently experiences congestion in the corridor. So with that, thank you very much, and thank you for having us.
So, it's actually always funny to me on these occasions where I'm standing at the podium at a chamber event, because I'm usually sitting in the audience, like trying to think of what questions I'm going to ask the speakers. And when I'm at the podium, I'm thinking they're all sitting there trying to think of what hard questions they're going to ask me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this today. And it really, the timing's exactly right because of what Chris was saying about the groundbreaking coming up next week on I-66, because we're about to enter that phase as it comes to this project that every project goes through, where people start to think it was a bad idea because it feels like it's making traffic worse than better. And in fact, sometimes it does. Sometimes during construction, things are worse than they were before construction started. But the reality is that, and Mike showed this in his slides, these projects are having a huge impact on relieving congestion in our region. People don't always feel that because they say, well, I'm still sitting in traffic. And for the individual driver on that particular day, it may not feel different. But when you look at the data from a global perspective, how it's affecting drivers everywhere, the impact has really been huge. And particularly when you compare to what the expectation was for those same corridors, in a future timeline. When we make transportation decisions, be it when we're talking about a public-private partnership like we have on 66 or 95, whether it's something that the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority is doing, a locality, or the Commonwealth Transportation Board, we don't try to fix today's problems. What we're really trying to do, and these public-private partnerships are a really important part of this, is we're rather than trying to fix the problem of today, is we're trying to fix the problems of the future. And we're really looking to, these days we tend to look at 2045 or 2050 as our event horizon. If we do nothing, what will traffic be like in 2045? And the answer we know, it's horrible. It will be worse than it is now, and it's already horrible. In fact, almost every project we look at, well, it goes a step further. I was going to say every project we look at, we find that if we don't do something now, by 2045, that corridor will be complete gridlock and you literally won't be able to move. And in fact, if we don't discover that, your project actually probably isn't a very good candidate for funding. If you tell us, well, in 2045, it'll be pretty bad. We go, well, that sounds fantastic. I look forward to pretty bad, because pretty bad is worse than complete gridlock. There's a couple of reasons why here in Virginia, I think we've been so successful with projects like this. There's a couple of key components. And one, frankly, is about the ability of these road projects to get people out of their cars. And it's a little counterintuitive. The big complaint I think that we hear from citizens a lot is, we're just gonna pour more asphalt on, and it's gonna induce more traffic, and the road is gonna be super crowded on day one because more people are gonna wanna drive on it. And that's certainly not the plan, but it's also not been the reality. What I think is really fascinating is when we were talking about the I-95 express lane projects, which we're gonna take two existing lanes of HOV and convert them into 3 lanes of high occupancy toll lanes. The people who complained most loudly about that idea were the slugs. The people, did anyone hear slug ever? see, I mean, we all work here in the county, because we don't get to do it. So every now and then I get to slug up to DC, and you know, after a meeting early in the morning, I'll pick up slugs and drive into DC. And about every third time someone recognizes me and I end up in a conversation about the Express Lane project. They said, well, what will happen is no one will ever want to ride HOV anymore. No one will want to slug anymore. They'll just want to pay the toll. And actually, Transurban very early on did a study on this and polled sluggers. And they asked them, said, do you think people are more likely to carpool or less likely to carpool after the express lane is open? And something like 70% of people said, well, people will be far less likely to carpool once the toll option is available. Then they asked the question, do you think the ability to ride single occupant paying a toll will change your patterns, or will you continue to carpool every day? Oh no, I will never give up slugging. I will slug until the day I retire. It will not change my behavior in any way. And that was the answer about 75% of the time, which implies that 35% of the driving population assumed that they were different than everybody else. I'm assuming that the 30% who said it would change behaviors meant their own behaviors. But what the data has shown is that it's actually the people who use transit, who ride our PRTC buses, or who carpool, who are actually benefiting the most. That travel time, even though there are more vehicles in the lanes, there are actually travel times for carpoolers and transit riders have actually improved during this period of time. Aubrey Lane, our current Secretary of Transportation, points out a really fascinating detail. And this upset, you know, and we all have friends, everybody in this room, I know a lot of you don't ride on 95 every day, but you all have friends who do and tell you how bad it is every chance they get. And, well, at least I do, everyone tells me how bad it is every chance they get. And inevitably, the observation is, you know, I'm sitting in this heavily congested traffic, and I'm watching these cars zip by me, and it doesn't feel like anyone's using them. And then I hit them with this data point. On I-95, we move more people on I-95 between, let's say, roughly Woodbridge and the Pentagon every single day. And you can draw the lines where you want to draw them, but we move more people between Woodbridge and the Pentagon every single day in the express lanes than we move in the general purpose lanes. Let that soak in. The express lanes are moving 45 miles an hour or faster. Sometimes going 65, 75. I mean, speed limit caps out at 65, but I mean, I've been on them when they're going 75 miles an hour, zipping past traffic going under 45 miles an hour. Yet more human beings are actually moving on the express lanes than are moving on the general purpose lanes. That's not because of the huge number of people who are paying the tolls, because if that were the case, then the express lanes would be just as congested. It's because of the huge number of people that have migrated from a single occupant rider situation, either into a carpool or into an OmniRide bus operated by PRTC. And Bob Schneider, director of PRTC, will tell you, I mean, we're already at a point where, you know, our ability to add more service is essentially capped out because of some of our financial constraints. We could add more buses to the express lanes and fill them up right away because the demand is absolutely there. So there's a huge impact in terms of reducing the use of single occupant vehicles. The reality is, if we ever were to have tried to fix traffic by making it easier to drive single occupant, it would be doomed to failure. So solutions that encourage ride sharing are a really positive thing for the region. But they're also a really positive, these create a really positive outcome for other transportation projects in the region. You've probably seen in the papers a bit, you know, I've been working very hard with counterparts in other jurisdictions, Manassas Park, Fairfax County, to get funding for adding additional capacity for Route 28 between Old Town Manassas and I-66. We are looking at a project that's going to be on the order of $200 million to start. What I can tell you is, if the state had not entered into an agreement with Express Mobility Partners at I-66, I would literally not be having conversations about Route 28. I wouldn't be talking to people about it. It would be a waste of my time and theirs. And the reason for that is this. At the end of the day, the highest priority for adding capacity in a region like ours has to be to the interstates. We have to, you know, they are the corridors that move the largest number of people in motorized vehicles of all types. If we're not adding capacity to the interstates, it would become just literally physically impossible to add enough capacity to secondary roads like Route 1, like Route 28 to 29, and even to our local roads like University Boulevard or Prince William Parkway or Route 234. Because to handle the additional amount of traffic we would need would require so much right-of-way in these local and secondary roads that we'd have to blow up entire neighborhoods in order to get, you know, build 16-lane mega highways through the county. No one wants that. So if the state and the region were forced to make the kind of investments that the private sector is able to make and then recoup through tolling, it would essentially absorb all of the money that is available in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia for transportation improvements. Now, the obvious challenge with that is no one south of Chappaquamsett Creek or west of Bull Run, who's in the state legislature or in local government, is going to tolerate using the entire state's revenues to improve 66 or 95 exclusively in Northern Virginia. But even if we could somehow get past that, the problem we would have is there would literally just be no money left over for any other project. So when we look at equally important corridors, like a Route 28, like a Route 1, we have to recognize that those projects are really only possible because the state has found innovative new ways to finance projects like 95, 495, 66, 395. In fact, I think one of the frustrations that, we just had an election, Governor-elect Northam's going to be taking office in a few weeks, and we don't know who the next Secretary of Transportation is going to be, but they've got a problem in a way. Because our current secretary, Aubrey Lane, and his predecessor, we all know Sean Connaughton, they had all these interstate highways that were great candidates for public-private partnerships. And we're running out of interstate highways in Northern Virginia that we can turn into express lanes with high occupancy lanes dedicated for that purpose. So the next secretary isn't going to be able to say, hey, great, I just made a fantastic new deal. We'll be able to break ground on that new express lane project. And I have a feeling these guys are all going to start looking at the other side of the Beltway pretty fast here, I-270, and Governor Hogan will get to have those conversations. The last observation I'll just make that's really important is that I think there's still some challenges we have as a region and as a transportation community in helping the public understand the value of these projects. Everyone, like I said, people who use transit, people who ride share, have figured out that advantage. We've got better lanes that are more high-tech, better maintained, more suited for high occupancy travel. Those folks who have no choice but to ride single occupant or for whatever reason still don't fully understand the value. What's interesting is that we've also found that actually everyone's traveling faster. Not everyone is traveling at or above the speed limit, but they are traveling faster than they were before these roads were constructed. But the big complaint, and you'll see it on social media, you'll see it on there's entire websites dedicated to it. You'll see politicians run for office on this issue, is that the tolls are so darn high. And I was actually interacting with someone on my own Facebook this morning. A friend of mine put something up about how angry she was that the tolls were $24 and traffic was just as bad in the express lanes as they were in the general purpose lanes. And I had to go on, I didn't have to, I felt obliged to go and explain to her, yes, that is exactly the point. The fact that traffic is as bad on the express lanes as it is in the general purpose lanes is why the toll is $25. I think there's a misunderstanding that people have that, well, if traffic's bad on the express lanes, people shouldn't have to pay a lot for them, and the price should be low because they're getting such bad service. And I'm a marketing guy at heart, and as a marketer, I'm saying that we're not getting the message out right. The reason the price is, I guess when you come into an appliance store, if I've got a $3,000 refrigerator, and you compare that to a $500 refrigerator, you want to assume that the $3,000 one is better. What people don't understand is that sometimes that refrigerator is $3,000 because they don't actually want you to buy it. Well, that is always the case with the express lanes. If the toll is so high that you are looking at it and saying, why would anyone in their right mind pay $25 to drive on a congested road? They've done their job because they're saying, please don't get on the road. It's really congested and it's not a good investment of your time or money right now. What they want is to be able to clear that incident, that crash that may have caused the congestion, or get people past the congestion point that's in the general purpose lanes and drive people away from the express lanes so they can get that cleared and open it back up for the rideshare folks or for the people who are now willing to pay $12 or whatever it is. And I'll acknowledge this, I'm a big user of them. Mike had the chart where he had the circle chart and showed which segment of the pie, how much people paid. I was in that little tiny orange segment, the 1% that pays between $80 and $100 a month in tolls. And sometimes I was in that slightly larger green segment that pays 3%. That 3% pays over $100 a month. I use them almost everywhere I go at this point in time because for me, the amount of time I can save, and again, they can show you the data on this, the amount of time I can save is always pays itself back in the amount of additional time I can spend at my business. I'm rarely driving on the express lanes between 5:30 and 7 o'clock on a weekday when traffic is at its worst. But at 3 in the afternoon, when it's just pretty darn heavy, that $6 toll probably gets me back to the appliance store 20 minutes faster and gives me a guarantee that I'm going to get back there on time and saves me money. Now, there's another category that I don't think they've carved out, which is sort of companies, how much companies pay collectively across several transponders. Appliance Connection may be the biggest customer that the toll lanes have, because I've reached the point where and if anybody who's got trucks on the road, let me just give you a piece of advice. Every crew chief in Appliance Connection's delivery fleet has been directed, you will take the express lanes every time, period. And a great way to get yourself a bad review is to show up at the appliance store at 8:30 at night after we're closed and someone has to sit there waiting for the last crew to come in and say, what took you so long? Did you have a problem with the delivery? No, but the tolls were $18 and I knew you didn't want me to pay that, so I sat in bad traffic instead. Because what it cost me to keep a truck on the road, and at this point, since it's after 6 o'clock, I'm now paying overtime to keep a truck on the road. There's no price that the toll could possibly get to that wouldn't make it a good investment for my company to get that delivery crew back to the store 45 minutes faster. And I've talked to more and more companies who have trucks or drivers out on the road every day who are saying that the efficiencies they're seeing on their bottom line are really substantial when you look at that business opportunity. And that really goes to the whole point, that it's giving us choices. It's that they don't make sense for everyone, and they don't make sense for anyone every time. But it's one more option that we can provide. And the last little thing I'll just observe is this, and going back to the brick construction, we were watching Chris's presentation. They were showing, it was a great video. And many of you, I don't want to predict how your marriages work, but I'm sure that at some point in time there's been this moment of, hey, let's put on that rom-com that we just got from Netflix and get a bottle of wine. To set the stage for a romantic evening. In my marriage, my wife needs to know, like, hey honey, why did I put on that video about the Transform 66 project and get you a legal pad and a pencil? And then you know it's gonna be a fun night in our house. Because that was really exciting to me. And what I loved best about it was, we're listening, we got the guy, the announcer guy, saying like, well, transportation improvements we made at the interchange of Sudley Road and near Act 234. And in the background is like this rom-com music. Sudley Road is gonna be great. We're gonna have this interchange at Sudley Road. And then all of a sudden there's this pause and it's I-66 interchange with Route 28. And I thought it was gonna be like the guy from before all the Jason Bourne movies. It's like the music's dun, dun, dun. And that's how we feel about it, just so you know. And then what was really funny is I'm responding to the music, and then they showed the video of what the new I-66 US 28 interchange is going to be, and every single one of you looked at that and went, yeah, it's going to be like that. But here's the really cool part. You're not going to have to sit at 4 different traffic signals to get across 66 to Dulles Airport. And it's going to be a really huge improvement. And then I thought, oh, it's going to be just as bad as Nutley Street, and just as bad at whatever comes after Nutley. And the music didn't change. And then all of a sudden it's again. And I'm like, oh, they're getting up to where it intersects with the Beltway and ties into the 495 express lanes again. So the music was really well chosen. Thank you. But I appreciate it, the opportunity to talk about this, because I think if you have anybody who has any questions about this, when your neighbors complain, have them give me a call, have them give these guys a call, have them give Brendan a call, because when people understand how the lanes work, they really start to figure out that they really are a benefit.